Welcome to Super Agents Live. This is the one place where you can come and hear the most successful people in real estate. You'll hear how these super agents built their businesses, how they stay productive, and how they stay motivated. Who am I? My name's Toby Salgado, and I made my first million in real estate. And I'm your host for the next 30 minutes while we talk to yet another amazing real estate entrepreneur. Stay tuned.
Let's go! Yeah!
Hey everybody, what's up? I hope you are crushing it right now, wherever you are. Hey, look, today on the show, I bring on a speaker, trainer, and author. We talk about her new book called Brand Clarity, and we talk about what it really means to build a brand. Now, I get frustrated many times when people talk about branding, because people typically, when they talk about branding, they're talking about their logo, they're maybe talking about a particular ad campaign. And, I specifically hear this when I see someone spend money on some useless form of advertising. And when I ask, like, why are you doing that? And when it doesn't work, meaning generate calls, what they will commonly say is, well, I did it for branding, or the branding's good. Today's guest talks about branding as something more fundamental, both to you and your business. She explains how a brand is an authentic representation of your values and concepts. She explains how to create your brand, as well as how, once fully formed, it will inform all of your messaging, from the way one approaches a market to the type of people one works with. I particularly resonated with the idea that if my brand is authentic to my way of interacting with the world, I'm going to attract the type of people I want to work with and the types of deals that I most desire. Look, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I think it was fantastic. All right, here we go. That's the cough again. Today on the show, I am thrilled to have today's guest on, especially in where we are in this market of 2021. Today's guest is a speaker, a trainer. She's an author. She recently wrote a book, Personal Brand Clarity. She's a branding expert, and we're going to get into a little bit about some of the things you guys need to be figuring out before you create a marketing campaign. I'm thrilled to welcome Suzanne Tulien. I hope I said your name right, Suzanne.
It's Suzanne Tulien.
Tulien, I'm sorry. Hey, Suzanne, thrilled to have you here. Before we get into, what your expertise is, maybe take a minute and just a brief minute and tell everybody a little bit about who you are, and then we'll get into what you're doing.
Okay. So I've been doing what I'm doing for over 30 years now, and I kind of pivoted from the marketing and advertising and design arena to the personal brand development arena, or the internal brand development arena. And what that is it's where I go in and help the organizations identify and define who they are as a brand, and then literally align to that. So creating actions and behaviors that are in alignment or on brand to who they say they are, so that when they go to market, they are actually delivering a promise and delivering on that promise every single day.
Right.
So that's just a little bit of an insight into, that way of thinking before you go out and spend all these dollars in marketing.
And I think that's great. I think that is fantastic. And look, I see too many people go out and they create some sort of, again, marketing or advertising plan for the year, and they institute it. And again, I think but our audience that we talk to are primarily realtors, right? We have everybody listening to the show, but that's who we sort of target, and a lot of these people don't know who they are. All they know is I'm a realtor and I sell real estate. And and I often go, look, that's not good enough, man. You need to tell me, like, you need to have a focus, meaning, are you good at selling waterfront or downtown condos or equestrian property? I don't care what it is, but you need to pick an angle. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a danger in not knowing who you are. And that, of course, is what I like to say is diluting the brand. So when you don't understand who you are and you don't have the clarity around those particular superpowers that you bring to the table, those unique philosophies and insights that you can bring to the table that others cannot, then you end up actually chasing the client because you want to appease them in ways that you're just so impacted by this external environment. You're out there chasing them versus you standing in your own power, knowing who you are, and really beginning then a marketing campaign because you know how to pull them in. So you don't have any construct or any foundation to really market. You don't have a narrative. You don't have a unique, set of ways of being in terms of how you deliver your customer service that is unique, because you're doing everything that everybody else is doing.
Right.
And that's the danger in not taking that time and identifying and defining who you are.
And I think it's a gigantic danger, and I often will, on the same kind of topic, I love Porsches and I race Porsches, and that's sort of my side thing. But, when I have a car, especially my Porsche, I take it to the Porsche mechanic, right? And there's other people that are, a car is a car. There's a lot of other people that might be some guy might be a Honda mechanic, but dude, I'm not going to take my car to that guy because, I have a Porsche and I want it to run as well as it can be. And I think we've all had conversations with that type of person, right? They may actually have the skills to do what I need done, but it looks to the world like this guy's a Honda mechanic, and I think if I hear what you're saying accurately, Suzanne, somebody that looks like a Honda mechanic, says he's a Honda mechanic, but has the ability to work on a Porsche. When I take my Porsche to him, and then he tries to explain, oh no, I can do that too. It just doesn't seem authentic, right? Like I'm going to walk away from that guy.
Yeah, because you have this intimate knowledge of this beautiful car that you love and so well. You want someone who knows that same realm of world and understands the Porsche like you do, right? So there has to be that level of trust and knowing that I know you know what I want, I know you know what I need, and I know you know how to do it.
Right. And I think going back to, I want to get into some of what you talk about in your most recent book, Personal Brand Clarity. I think it all for each of us, if in this case, the Porsche mechanic, right? If his brand and everything he said to the world on his website or however you reach the world, whatever platform, if it was around Porsche, then I would know I'm at the right guy, right? And I think so many people, their skills may translate to Porsches and Hondas and Fords or whatever, but they're, you need to reach out to the world with again, as you say, who you are and what your strengths are. And you can't change that, right? You can't back it up. And just reaching out to the world in a very general way, which is I'm an expert mechanic, right? That doesn't tell me anything either. But the problem is,
No.
Suzanne, as I know you are aware, people think if they reach out to the market and say, I do this, I just work on Porsche race cars, they believe that they're excluding the rest of the world. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, but maybe you could speak to that, and maybe we can talk about how people zero in on their brand and how you get them comfortable in reaching out to the world in a very specific way.
Well, I really want to, in lieu of what you're saying, I really want to talk about how your brand isn't always about just the doing. In fact, it's mostly not about the doing, because if you have skill sets to work on a car, you can work on a car, in any car, but it's the person, it's the ambiance, it's that charismaticness, it's that resonation that happens when you meet somebody. It's the way they talk, it's the delivering on their promise. It's all those pieces that are in the being versus always in the doing. And so the personal brand piece backs up and it really flushes out who you are as a person so that you can begin to leverage those attributes that over and above can override those external ways of doing things, because so many people think that, buying a house is a commodity, selling a house is a commodity, and real estate is a commodity. So where are the distinctions? Where it's in the people that you actually begin to work with. And do they value what you value? Do they deliver on what you are expecting and certain standards, your brand standards, right? Where is the chemistry? Because I can go out and interview 15 agents and they can all sell me a house. They can all help, do what I want done in that industry. But who am I going to relate to the best and who's going to connect with me in terms of my core values and deliver on what they're saying they will deliver on? And so that's the work before we actually go out and market it.
Okay. Well, all right. So let's talk about that a little bit. And as we talk about this, maybe Suzanne can let's try the speaker route instead of the holding up the phone route. Because I think you have some good stuff to say. I want to make sure everybody hears it. So when you say it's not, don't focus on the doing, right? Or maybe that's step 2 in the process, and you need to focus on the being. Like, how would you unpack that? What do you mean? Unpack that a little bit, because I think I could try to, but I don't know where to start.
Yeah, so it's a methodology I've created since 2010. I wrote a book with my business partner called Brand DNA. And we wrote that book because we thought that there needed to be a process to unpack and identify and define a company's brand. Like, how do you even begin to go about doing that? And so for the Personal Brand Clarity book, I did that in a way to where the person themselves, they own their own book of business. They are the brand of their business as a solopreneur, as an agent, as a broker, right? As whatever it is that you are delivering on. So those pieces and parts that are in that process to unpack that are a set of core values, not only identified, but definitely defined. And that's really the secret sauce. We take a deep dive into defining what your core values mean to you and how they actually show up in what it is that you do every day. And then there's a set of core, what we call the brand style attributes. And these are your 4 to 5 personality traits that when you flush out and really hone in on and land on, then you get to leverage those in your marketing content, in how you show up, in the customer experience. So all of these pieces, the more clear you are on who you are trying to create in the minds of your market. In fact, let me just define what a personal brand is at this point, because I think that's kind of elusive out there, and
Sure.
It's important for people to understand. So a personal brand is merely just a perception that lives preferably, ideally, in your mind first. Like, you know who you are. You've got this perception of you, and then is transferred into the minds of your audience. It's based on emotion and defined by their experience with you and your way of being. So when you get to, every single agent out there already has a brand. People themselves already have a brand. The problem is are we in control of it? And if we're not aware of it, if we're not conscious, strategic, and deliberate of it, we cannot control it. That means everybody out there that's perceiving us right now is creating their own formulations of who they think we are. So there's a danger area there too, right? So we want to get our arms around that.
Okay, let's see if we and by the way, Suzanne, I love everything you're saying so far, and your audio is terrible. But let's struggle through this, because I think what you're saying is worthwhile, and I hope everybody sticks with us. So how
do you want me to go back to speaker?
Yeah, try that, please. So okay, I'm sure you're back now. So when you said brand, it's a perception, right? It's a perception of yourself. I can tell you that I think I'm extremely introspective, and I think I know who I am pretty well, but I don't know how I would take who I am. I don't know how to merge the two, right? Like, I don't know explain to me how I would take a perception of myself. And by the way, my perception of myself is overall like super high, right? Like, I'm really good at everything, I believe. It doesn't mean it's true, but I believe that I'm great at everything. The problem is, right, like, not everybody is wired like me, right? There's a lot of people when you ask about what their perception of themselves are, right, they are racked with fear of I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. They're racked with, doubt of, whether they can even start this business or not. So when we start at the brand, as you say, in the perception of yourself, like, again, let's dig into that a little bit. What do you mean? How do you do that?
That's a big question. So let me see if I can unpack that again for you and help you determine. So the more we are clear, so it's about doing that work. So the clearer we are in going into ourselves and understanding and fleshing out those core values. And let's say one of your brand style attributes is being highly introspective. And so when you go about defining how you show up, like how would I know without you telling me that you were introspective? How would I know what shows up in your actions and your behaviors? And this is, Toby, where the work actually is. And when we can identify and define that, and we start making these attributes that we're creating for ourselves, we're landing on as who we are, more tangible, we can literally start delivering them in the customer experience. We can literally start talking about them and infusing them into more consciously into our way of being. And so we have to make that introspective nature that you have, and maybe it's your superpower. How do we make that tangible in our world? So that's the work, right? And the process is all in the book on how to flesh that out.
Well, okay. And I don't want to get sidetracked here, but I think I think I can look at any one of my attributes, and I can, for me, I can make them tangible. I think the problem is how even though I can make them tangible, I may not see the value in them, right? So if I could make my introspection, my personal introspection tangible, I don't know how that would translate to valuable to my clients. And I don't want to get too far stuck on me if we can illustrate this better for people listening. But how do you take something that's very unique to yourself, something like introspection, or something like there's some people who are super analytical, right? They're highly introverted, but they're super analytical, right? These are people who right. So how do you make that? How do you take analytical skills? And maybe not a high level of personal skills, and say, oh, this is how it's going to translate to you as my client in a super positive way.
Yeah. So you know what? Those people that are highly analytical, and that's great example, is they're going to start attracting those highly analytical clients. Yeah. Because like attracts like, and so their analytical style will show up in how they run the numbers, how they narrate, and what they're doing for the client. They talk about those details. They talk about those value propositions that really get into the minutia of what their clients who are also analytical want and need to hear in order to feel the trust, right? So you're starting to realize who you are by labeling, creating those, what I would call your attribute assets in your value construct. And then there's more to it than that. We didn't finish all of the components of the DNA. Okay. But if you just had a set of core values and you had a set of brand style attributes, you can already begin to reshape the way you talk about what it is you talk about, your own unique value proposition. I don't care what you're selling or what your niche is, but just how you go about showing up will begin to already attract those who get it, love it, and appreciate it, and will pay premium pricing for it.
Right. I listen, I totally agree with that. I 100% agree with that. And I think the way, so if you think it's more helpful to go through your brand DNA checklist, I mean, let's do that. And I think the way, I happen to be one of those really analytical guys who is super extroverted, but when I reach out to the world, right? When I do these interviews, for example, and I'm reaching out to the world, and and my analytical brain breaks things down, right? It's I don't, for me, and I don't know about if it's for everyone else, but for me, I don't necessarily have to outline on a checklist that I'm analytical and extroverted, and right, because it comes out in what I do, right? Everybody's
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's it. It's not about touting that you're that. It's about showing up that way. And you can certainly, on your website say that my approach is
Yeah.
is very analytical, and I do that in this way. And you start talking about, running the numbers and making sure that everything's matching up, and that you take the time to make sure that what they're looking for is a match to what they're needing. All the different, it's so big that
Sure.
we could get into the minutiae of that
Absolutely.
as well. Yep.
Okay. Well, and fair. So, okay. So what do you want to talk about your DNA checklist as to, for everybody listening, some of the things that they can start to think about and sketch out in their businesses and lives?
Yeah, I think what keeps people from actually doing this part of the work, which I call the missing piece, the assigning of meaning to who you are versus what you're doing. I mean, that's totally diluted with so many other agents out there talking about the same thing. The only way you can truly distinguish yourself is by understanding what your attributes and superpowers are and your core values and your brand style attributes, and then knowing your set of differentiators. And these differentiators are everything from the credentials that you might have in your profession to other things more personal, like you've traveled the world, or you speak 5 languages, or you play these musical instruments, because that's what makes you human to your consumer, to your client, right? And if you can even begin to relate to somebody through, let's say, a hobby. Like I remember doing a workshop where I mentioned, I don't know why, but somehow I mentioned I was a fly fisher woman. And
so's my wife.
at the end of my workshop, I had this woman come up to me and said, "You and I are going to work together because I have never met another fly fisher woman before." And blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's what created the connection. Believe it or not, So there are things that I think the community or our audiences are probably neglecting to begin to really think through and pull out to leverage as their own competitive advantage. When if they don't have that information, they're just, again, chasing the client or showing up like everybody else is showing up. And that's a lost cause. That's a danger zone.
Right. And I think that's 100% accurate, and I would agree with what you said, because I think the problem for most people is, when it comes to that your fly fish, your hobby is fly fishing, or the simple fact that you got into college and you were a runner, or that you have 3 kids, or that or that you've been divorced, right? You just got divorced or going through divorce, right? A lot of these things people may not see as assets, but they absolutely can be.
Sure, absolutely. And it's taking the time to do that. And in fact, what happens with this process, I often say, is that when you do this deep work, you start to fall back in love with who you are, and you step into your potential and your power in ways that you never thought you could. And that in and of itself, Toby, I think is just raising your vibration of clarity. And then you start attracting almost out of the blue those types of people that get that. And you avoid those negative thinking processes.
Right. Well, and the other, I think the byproduct of that is, right, if I reach out to the world and say, look, I'm super analytical, I love racing Porsches and skydiving, and I have 3 kids, and whatever, all the stuff that I ride a supermoto on the weekends, right? Like all that kind of stuff. See, I don't do that because I feel like I sound like an ego maniac, but I think if here's what I think you're saying is that if you can align your personal and core values and attributes, and then and put that out in the world and attract people that have similar values and attributes, not only is your work going to be easier, but you're going to be more happy. You're going to be thrilled. You're going to be thrilled to wake up in the morning and go, look, I'm working with Suzanne and she loves to fly fish just like me, right? Like, or
Yes.
She's going through the same thing or has been through the same thing.
Yeah, how novel is that, to have more fun doing what you love and stay in alignment the
Right.
whole time, right?
Well, work's not supposed to be fun, Suzanne.
Oh,
I'm
let's
joking.
talk about that for a while.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. It should be fun. It should be fun. I think so. Okay, so what is next? So let's say that we can figure out. And now, would you say like you fly fishing or racing Porsches or jumping out of airplanes? What would you call that? Would you call that a differentiator or what like how would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. There's a whole activity and exercise in the book as well. I also have an online course that walks people through this as well. They're a different type of learner than book learning.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so differentiators come in all shapes and sizes, and it's really about taking that deep dive backwards and see where you came from and really begin to leverage all of those unique experiences that you have and bring them to the forefront at a real conscious, strategic, and deliberate level so that you can start differentiating yourself in the minds of your market.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do that if it's all packed away and you just start looking like a commodity in a networking event. The first thing you say is that you're a realtor, right?
Sure. Right.
Then people shut down. They're a dime a dozen in our community.
Everywhere.
I mean, really, we're saturated.
Yeah.
So I 15, 20 friends, not to mention 50 to 100 clients out there I could refer people to. And who do I refer them to, right? I need to know who they are uniquely so that I can get a sense of a good match.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And so, so in some ways I almost see what you are, your expertise, your book, it may be a little bit like therapy, right? Like what are and the problem, I think that's valuable and we can talk about that. But I think one challenge might be that people go and they get into this therapy. Who am I? What do I stand for? What do I love to do? What do I want to do? What kind of people do I want to work with? Right? What kind of transactions do I want to do? Right? If we can get clear on all those things and then reach out to the market, number one, we are going to attract those like people. Number two, we are going to be happier when we do to attract those people. But it may turn into the fact that when you look at what your attributes are and what you like to do and the kind of people you want to work with, you might go, dude, I don't want to be a real estate agent. This whole thing that I've been working on for 2 years doesn't fit, or the accountant or whatever you might be. How often?
Absolutely. That's happened many times with my clients.
I was just going to ask that.
Career. They have, yeah. And which is great because, there's reasons that we do the internal work, and there's your soul or your whole, essence of who you are is just craving something that's in more alignment with what you want or who you are. And again, it's about uncovering that. And there's such a resistance to do that because it's not right away. It's not a money making activity, right? It's not like I'm dialing for dollars on the phone and I might get a client from that, but it's really the foundational work that helps to manifest what you're wanting in the very near future, as soon as you get that clarity. And then you get to start out behaving your competition because you know who you are and how you should be showing up in a way that's so authentic, so fun, and so in alignment with who you are. Changes everything.
It has to. I mean, it has to change everything.
Right. Right.
But
yeah, I see it all the time.
But so what is the resistance that you, because here's what I have to imagine, right? I work with lots of different people, in this world, right? I coach people, we do the podcast, and we have all sorts of other stuff that we do. But when I try to get people to do this, there's a resistance to it. And the resistance sometimes is, people have a lot of fear about who they are and what they've built. And, sometimes somebody might be slightly successful but they want to position it to, everybody's on Instagram and they want to build a persona, a caricature of a super successful person. And when it comes to, outlining some of these things, right? Like people are scared to look at themselves, and they're scared to say, oh no, because when I look at my attributes and my positives, I must also then look at my negatives. They just come up, and people run from that stuff, even though I think you need to explore those to really do this process that you're outlining appropriately.
Yeah, I think the negatives do come up, but we don't focus on that in my process.
Okay.
I mean, we really try to keep focus on the strengths and in well, I think any attribute could be positive and or negative, but we have to look at these attributes that you flesh out as how do I make them real in my world and begin to step into them and make them tangible for someone to realize this is what my core values are. Or like one of my style attributes is efficiency. I know this because I lean into efficiencies everywhere. I recognize it at restaurants I recognize inefficiencies a lot, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
I
I
know
see them everywhere. The way you're driving, dude, go faster, get in the other
yeah.
lane. You're standing in line, yes, I all the time. Like everybody's too slow for me.
Right. So I know that that's a big style attribute for me. So I can leverage when I'm working with a client or even a prospect to talk to them about my coaching programs, how they're accelerated because I am so efficient in getting you where you need to be. And we do it through systems and processes. And that's something that I hone in on, I lean into, I love. And if you're one of those types of people that just likes to get results quick and get to the point quick, I have really no fluff, then I'm your gal, right? So that's how I would leverage efficiencies. And I talk about it in my programs. I talk about it on my website and, of course, like right here.
Right. So for the people listening and if they want to, prior to buying your book or reading your book or whatever, what are some of the questions that where do you start? Do you start with your style attributes? Do you start with your core values? Like what is step one in this process for your clients?
Yeah, so step one is generally the core values. And as we continue to build throughout the process and flesh more things out, most of those other items that you're fleshing out are going to be in some way related to your core values. Mm-hmm. And you'll find, and it's such a great surprise, how everything is connected, that you're building out this profile or this construct of yourself. And what's so powerful about it is that you're naming it. And when we name things, we can actually then become them, right? So I think back to your other question about the resistance people have in doing a process like this, I think that today our attention span is so short and we want the fastest way to make money or the fastest way to make something happen as possible. And we're willing to do it over and over and over and over again and still not get the same results that we want, right? It's just this weird thing. Keep doing what you've always been doing and you'll never get a different result, right? So this is the missing piece that if we just dedicated 30 days to uncovering this and doing the deeper work, we're going to reposition ourselves, which is our brand value position. And it gives us content. It gives us a new way of being. We open up Pandora's box. We start getting creative because now we have this construct that we can back everything up to and say that now we can be consistent. Now we can be authentic to who we know we are because we've named it, and we can be distinctive. It's so powerful.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I lost you for a second. Let me ask you about, you've used the word construct, 2 or 3 times in this. And when it comes to, I want to talk to you about core values and what those are, because, if I talk to anybody, right? If I saw somebody in the street or in the store or even, somebody in business, I go, look, what are your core values? Either one, they haven't thought about it and they have to go, oh, what is a core value? Or 2, they would rattle off, like, some of my clients, they'll rattle off their quote core values. However, when people sit down and create core values for their business or really think about it themselves, a lot of times it is a construct, right? They're constructing them as we go.
Yeah.
And sometimes constructs are not real, right? It's just something you've constructed, something, there's values that you hope to achieve or hope to stand by. And we never know what those are until, if your core value is integrity, well, that's fine. Let's see, let's wait until you find $1 million in a bag and see how much integrity you have, right? What do you do with that? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So your question is how, again, do you make that construct a reality in
Well,
more
how do you?
tangible.
Sorry. So my question is so that's one question, and we can talk about that. But my real question is how do we create, or how do you outline your core values that are actually real, right? Real core values. We all have a certain amount of integrity, but at some point, I'm going to find a bag of money big enough where I'm not going to turn it in, and I'm going to put it in my closet, and I'm going to go buy something with it, right? Like, and so how do you actually get to truly what your core values are so that you can truly create a real brand that is resistant to the ups and downs and the troubles that we see in business that we're ultimately going to come up against?
Yeah, that is a great question. I have an activity that actually starts on page 132 of the book, and it's a self-actualization assessment. You go through that first, and it's based on Abraham Maslow's work. Mm-hmm. And then on page 133, we get into actually asking questions that begin to flush out what your core values are. And I'll share with you one question. The first question is, list 3 qualities. These are adjectives that you can't stand when you see them or experience them in other people. So the first way is to know what you don't want, right?
Yeah.
That you don't value. And then we work on flipping those around. And what do you know, or what are 3 qualities you notice when you are performing at your very best? You list those qualities. And then list 3 qualities you are embarrassed about when they surface in your own behaviors. So you're finding these things that you cringe at, right? Whether you can't stand it or you're embarrassed by it. And then it's magical because you get to then flip those into the opposite. And you end up having 6 or 9 adjectives that really begin to hone in on what you lean into. Core values are guiding principles that you may not have really ever identified or defined before, but this is that process to do that. And the defining piece is so powerful too. And that's another big part of me challenging my clients to ensure that they're defining them specifically and how they actually show up.
Well, so can we do like a quick exercise? So for you, what are 3 qualities that you can't stand in other people? Or give me 2, and then go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say obliviousness. Like just not even knowing what's going on around them, just total obliviousness. And then, of course, disrespect.
Weird.
I just can't stand that, right?
That's such a weird one for me. Okay, all right. What is another one?
I would flip the obliviousness around. I would probably flip that into being highly present, or consciousness, which is one of my core values, is consciousness. And that is just being aware, being very present, and being in tuned, and I can sense that in people, or I can sense it not in people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree with that. So if I did one, right, like, so for me, like, so I would never have obliviousness, but like I hate dishonesty, right? Like, I think we can all hate dishonesty. So if I take my absolute disgust for dishonesty, because I think for me, like, people that are dishonest, like, they're cowardly. I mean, there's all sorts of personal things that I find repulsive. So if I take that, if I have that, I hate dishonest people, right? How do I then turn that around to go, I'm super honest, or I try to be super honest, and I try to be super, I have a ton of integrity. Like, how do you then take this process and then flip it and then throw that and then, put that up on a billboard, right, to the world to say, this is what I stand for?
Right. So I get that one a lot. People, my clients end up coming up with an integrity or honesty. And then I asked them, I said, okay, go ahead and define that word to you in how you show up in your family life, in your work life, in your community life, with your friends and colleagues, with your own spirituality and wellness, with your finances. So they come up with, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 sentences that showcase how they show up in all those different areas under honesty. And then we look at that definition, and out of the blue, another word that they've written in that definition pops up. And it's almost more clear and more exact to what they were talking about versus the word honesty, like the word transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Like
genuine authenticity.
Yeah. So that gets into a little bit more meaty, juicy information, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so then they get even clearer on who they are and how they're showing up. So again, this isn't really about putting a billboard up and saying I'm genuine, but it's about how do I create the first 7 seconds, the first 20 seconds, the first initial contact with my the people that I'm meeting, and create genuine behavior. Like I want to get that into my consciousness. I want to get that into my mind. I want to deliver on my genuineness. And so how do I do that? And just the mere fact that you're more conscious of it puts you in that position.
I agree with that. That is such a fantastic point, right? If we can be conscious of where we want to, what we want to be, or how we want to show up in the world. If I can orient myself to a position in the morning, right? Somehow, like for me, I do this all the time, right? If I orient myself towards gratitude towards something, right? Like I always try to be like, I make sort of a like 2 gratitude things in the morning. When I can orient myself towards that, like I see gratitude, I see things that I'm thankful for all day long. But if I start my day, right, if I orient myself towards something that I'm dissatisfied about, I start to see that all day. So I totally.
You're so powerful.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I think I love everything that you're saying, and I totally see the value in it. I think the thing about this kind of work is that it's not something that you can do on your own, right? It's really difficult. I think you need a third party. I think you need somebody to sort of push you, right? I think you need a coach really to work through some of these things, because we fool ourselves, we lie to ourselves, and sometimes dude. Everybody, whether it's athletes or actors, they all have coaches, because you need an objective person in your life, right? Because we all fool ourselves.
Yeah, it's the forest through the trees, right? Are we really seeing who we are by looking at it, through our own filters? And I would say not only just a coach, but a process for sure. And this process, and being dedicated to that process. And if, I would say 95% of us out there would need a coach and or a process in order to take this incrementally and build on it and sequentially get more and more and more clear, and really begin to, again, open that Pandora's box of creativity and really start showing up very conscious, strategic, and deliberate. Mm-hmm. If I think your points are great, Toby. I love this discussion, and I could do this all freaking day because it's so insightful. And if I were to offer you $10,000 to do a marketing campaign, or offer you a way to get crystal clear and create a foundation and set a brand value position for yourself that will align you to begin to attract the people that you want and show up and do what you want to be doing in life, which would you choose?
There's no question I would choose the path. There's no question I would choose the I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Man, if I could get in tune, and I think I am in tune with myself, but if I could be, if my whole life could be, I guess, set up in such a way where everything that I did and everybody I worked with was in line with my values and an outlook on life. And I loved, the people that I worked with, and I loved the transactions or the deals that I was working on. Instead of just doing it because it's money or doing it because, I feel like I should or whatever it is, I $10,000 is nothing, right? You'd have to offer me a whole lot more money for me to go through and bumble through my life working with people I don't like or working on transactions or in an industry that is not suited for me, right? I want to wake up in the morning and just go, I love it. I love the calls that I have to make today. I love the work that is on my to-do list. Instead of waking up and going, man, I dread making this goddamn phone call to this person, right? I dread doing this. I know what's on deck for my 11:30 appointment and I'm not happy about it.
Exactly. So that's where the resistance comes in. We talked about earlier, right? How do we get more people to really understand that that the real work is foundational. The real work starts internally, because these days we are so externally impacted by our environment. We are no longer internally driven, and we've lost it. We've lost the ability to be internally driven, to discern differently, and really show up in our power. And that's the big disjointed, misaligned situation I think that so many of us are in these days.
I agree with that. And I think that we are, most businesses are misaligned. And I think there's sort of this fallacy of tomorrow, right? Like, okay, I'm just going to I'm going to work on this deal that I'm not happy about with this person that I don't particularly enjoy because it's a big deal. I'm going to do it right now. And once I get past this, then I can go and do the things I love that I'm more aligned with. And it doesn't happen, right? We move, at least in my life, Suzanne, I move from deal to deal to deal, and it's not completely perfect. And I just go, God, I'm just going to get through this phone call and then I'll be able to make the ones that I enjoy. And the problem is I never completely work out. I always have some of those things in my life, and I never completely can delete them. And I think you're right. Maybe, and I'm not saying that you are right, but maybe you're right. Maybe if I could create sort of a plan like this and I guess stick to it. I think that's the other thing. Like, you can create this construct, but then you have to stick to it, right? If you say you have tons of integrity, then when you find that bag, right, that brown paper bag with $1 million in it, that you do the right thing and turn it in, right? That's the right thing to do. Even though that I wonder how many of us actually would. Look.
So the beauty of this is, and the difference for me as a coach is what I apply to the coaching program is that I make sure you begin to make this tangible. It's not just going to show up on paper. You didn't just complete an activity and you're done. You can put it on the shelf and go about your way. We're going to begin living it. I'm going to help you infuse it into your systems and processes, into your narrative, into how you actually show up. So that's the other missing piece in terms of brand. People think they can design a logo and they've rebranded themselves. That is so not the case.
Yeah.
The icon, the logo, is just a visual representation that represents the brand, but the question still becomes, what is the brand? What is the icon actually representing? And if you haven't done that due diligence, then you're always putting up a facade, and you tend to change like a chameleon according to your external environment,
right.
rather than staying consistent and being internally driven with who you really are and trusting that that's going to attract the life you want.
That's right. And let me just comment on that last piece, right? Instead of trusting that your core values are going to align with the kind of business and create the kind of business that you want. What happens with people is they have this logo and this brand that they like, that they believe will get them some level of success. And then when it comes to actually, when we look at advertising and marketing, and I go, dude, you got to spend $10,000 a month, right? We have to believe in where we are and what we're reaching out to, you got to spend 10 grand a month, right? That's when people start to break down. However, right, if I would imagine, if you could be super aligned with your values, you can be super clear on who you want to work with and what kind of deals, and then I come to you and say, look, man, this is what we're gonna do, and it's 10 grand, right? You're gonna feel a whole lot better with going, listen, yeah, I'm all in on this thing,
Exactly.
right, there's gonna be a level of just belief that you have when you reach the market. There's going to be a level of belief and confidence that you're going to exude when you get in front of a client to tell them why you're the best person for them.
Toby, that's when I tell people that they've actually stepped into the knowing. And that's the capital T, the capital K, the knowing. That's the trust, right? You just know that this is right and you resonate with it and that it will come about. Yeah, I have clients clients that get through the program and say, I always thought I knew who I was until I did this. And now I know so much more clearly. We try to keep these attributes in our head, or if you ask that same person that you had mentioned earlier about their core values, and if they had core values and they rattled off 5 core values, you wait a week and ask them again, they will be different core values. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
So that's the problem. That's why we're so, misaligned or constantly impacted and not proactive about how we show up, because we're just chameleons.
That's right. Right. Well, no, and I think what you said, right, we are misaligned. And I think that when we are misaligned, when we are misaligned in the world with our brand or whatever it might be, I think what is in each of us, right, I think it just lends to a lack of confidence, right? A lack of that belief, that conviction that I was talking about earlier. And when you lack conviction as to who you are and what you're really trying to accomplish, you're not going to do anything wholehearted. And you and I both know in this market, in this world, anything that you do half-ass, not wholehearted, is not going to hit the mark.
Right. A confused mind doesn't buy. And if you're confused with who you are as a brand, your prospects are too.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to understand that.
Boom. God, Suzanne, I really wish I have a 10 o'clock. I really wish we could talk more, but we have to wrap up. I'm so sorry. You've been fantastic. I have a couple questions, right? So number one, we'll tell everybody your book at the end and where they can find you. But, we always ask for a book recommendation. I know you've been doing this a long time. But if, for someone who wants to, I guess, refine their brand and their approach, you can't say your book, but what book, right? What book, right? So here's the setup. I'm an aspiring agent. I have $25. What book should I go buy right now?
Oh my gosh. It's so hard to say because so many of these branding books are written for companies and not for people. And most of them that tout that they are branding are really touting marketing functions and tasks and not the true uncovering and discovering of the core brand. This is, and I can't mention my own. That's really difficult.
Because yours is the best. All right. Well, look, if you don't.
Well, it's not that it's the best. It's just really focused on what we just talked about. Yeah. And I don't really know any other book that has really gotten into that side of it without touching on so much. 90% of it is marketing and not the brand piece.
I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. People confuse branding and marketing. And I was going to, when we first got on this conversation, I thought that I was going to grill you on branding. I thought I was going to rip you apart with this brand impressions and then I honestly thought, Suzanne, I was like, I probably am not going to air this because I had this impression as to what, just because you talk about brand, what it was going to be. And right. I was thrilled, and I am very thrilled and excited that you are not you're talking about something different than what I think 90% of branding books are about. That's okay. All right. So look, here's my last question. Right? Do you have a morning routine or habit that you think has contributed to your success?
Oh my gosh, yes. I am on this app called Insight Timer. And it's a meditation app. It's 80,000 free meditations, classes. You can pay and take courses and that sort of thing. But I uncovered that, and I have been consecutively meditating every morning before I even get my butt out of bed. I'm meditating, even if it's 5 minutes. But then I end up going out throughout the day, and I'm starting to crave it. So I'm really starting to pop in and do a 10-minute here and there whenever I have a moment. It really centers me. It helps me remember who I am. And, of course, I practice what I preach. I look at my personal brand DNA all the time. I read my definitions over at least weekly. And I really talk my talk and I walk my walk. I mean, it's where you build that trust. So that's what I would recommend.
That's great. And I'll tell you, that goes back to, for me, that aligning yourself in the morning, aligning yourself throughout the day in terms of, because it's easy to get off track, man. I try to align myself to be a kind person, but cut me off on the freeway and I can snap, man. And I have to go, hold on, dude, don't snap. It's that guy's got something super important to do. Right. So just,
right. It's not about you. Right?
It's not. That's right. So I meditate every day. I use Headspace, and then I use Sam Harris's app called Waking Up. But when he says waking up, it's about waking up to consciousness. And
nice.
I will use those all the time. And and when. Oh man, it looks like during recording we lost connection. Our recording device went offline, so we didn't get the last couple of minutes. But I just really asked Suzanne where people could find her. And if you want to know more about Suzanne Tulien, you can go to brandascension.com. I think it's probably the best place to find her if you want to understand more about building your brand. I loved her as a guest. I hope you enjoyed it too. All right, everybody.
Let's go.
I'll see you next time.